Prof, good to speak to you as always. Now, why do you think the DA has been accused of hypocrisy in its coalition politics, particularly in light of Herman Mashaba's claims that they're covertly aligning with the ANC?
Good afternoon, Hugo, and thank you for the invitation. Yes, so I think this is quite important to reflect upon. The reality that we are facing here is that there are a conflation of issues in the arrangement of the government of national unity. And one of them is showing now that the minister who is from the Democratic Alliance finds herself in trying to balance issues of governance, issues of public policy, but also issues of politics. And politics here referring to the allegiance to the political party that the minister comes from. And so as an executive authority who is actually reporting to the president, she's finding herself in a very difficult situation. So it's more of a paradox. It's more of an oxymoron kind of a scenario. And so often when things like this happen, you would wish that there would have been a more senior member of the Democratic Alliance who has taken this role. It becomes easier for them to balance the dynamics within their party, but also to assert their relationship with the president, who is from a completely different political party. So I think we should observe more of these kind of nuances going forward, especially in portfolios like this, where the minister or the executive authority is actually not a senior in their political party.
Okay, so when we talk about this hypocrisy, one of the issues that's been talked about in the media is jobs for pals, right? So we have Ronaldo Hoos, the former DA Member of Parliament, who was offered a position in the Agricultural Minister's office. We also have Roman Cabernac, similarly offered positions, but subsequently those were withdrawn, and I think both had those positions terminated. And John Steenhuisen argues that the focus should be on the fact that he corrected the challenge, or he corrected this resistance that came in from the public. What's your take on that? Does this also speak to some of these issues on the double standards that we were speaking of?
Indeed, Hugo, this is a very important point that you are raising, because often what DA has usually presented itself in using a ticket that they are not going to be corrupt, that they are not going to be involved in malfeasance, and as you say, the jobs for pals. And so when these issues come, because they will always come, especially when they need to do their political deployees, once you get into government, there is what we often refer to as scenes of incumbency. So they cannot get away from such kind of situations, because it calls for the loyal party members to make sure that they represent political party positions in the departments where they are appointed. But also what we need to differentiate is that these positions that the DA has been struggling with are not even the positions in departments. They are positions in the ministry. So they are political offices that we are talking to, which should be much easier to manage and handle, unlike if it was a position that reports directly to the Director General. So they really need to clean their house when it comes to that matter.
Now, in your mind, does the DA's participation in the GNU undermine its long-standing position of opposing ANC's policies? Now, how does the party reconcile this with its voter base? And I suppose much of this comes from the fact that in order to create a working relationship, right, you may have to turn a blind eye, or maybe soften your attitude towards a particular stance by the opposition political party for the greater good.
So my view on this one, Hugo, is that DA is a winner in many instances for its participation in the government of national unity. And one of the reasons is that the ANC is still running the show. The ANC is still taking the bulk of the accountability to the population of South Africa because they are the president. They are also in the deputy president and many other portfolios in national government. So what that does to the DA is that it positions itself in ministries where they are appointed to say we are able to make some meaningful contributions. We are able to work with the ANC because South Africans have actually not given any political party an outright mandate. This positions DA very, very strategically to actually in future even take over the government, especially if ANC's ante is not up. The performance of ANC is not seen to be at the level where it should be. So DA, in my view, will always, even with this kind of issues that are developing, they will much likely come out to be a winner in the long run. So when these kinds of issues happen, I think theirs is to go back, reflect, and say how can they repurpose some of the positions that they've been allocated to and strengthen their governance mechanics there.
Now, Chair of the DA, DA Federal Chair, if you will, Helen Zille, a few months ago said something to the effect of the DA was content with about 20% of the vote, and that is something that they've subsequently got. Now, what are the long-term goals of the DA within the GNU? They've got a taste of governance, if you will, through the various portfolios that they have. Could this alienate their traditional voter base, do you think?
So there are a few issues at play there. Firstly, I think, as you referring to Ms. Helen Zille, they are trying to push a positive messaging to their electorate because they don't want to some backlashes in terms of how they are communicating. So to say they are satisfied with 20%, it's quite a very positive messaging going out to the electorates because then people realize that the DA is actually content and using the numbers they got very positively. But I think there are some slates within the DA itself and even within some of their voters that are not happy in the way they are relating with the ANC and that they feel that the ANC is sort of bullying the DA. But I think it's within the leadership of the DA to consolidate its strategy on how they are going to engage the ANC and further send a positive messaging to the electorate. Because what we need to remember is that a very few members of the public are active in political parties, but they are voters. And so it's quite important that when the political parties send their messages, they remember that we've got a significant number of voters that do not necessarily receive messages through their affiliations to political parties. So I think in sending that kind of a message, the DA is positioning itself for the subsequent elections. We know that we are going to be having local government elections very soon. So it's quite important that they send out that kind of a message so that it is landing very well within their constituencies, especially the voters.
So do you get the sense that the DA might compromise its stance to a degree in order to remain in government and obviously show how effective they can be? Because a few months ago, they were on the sidelines, right? Now they're in government, they're holding specific portfolios, making decisions, pushing their own agendas or pushing specific agendas, and their votership is able to judge them based on not the theoretical desire to be in power, but a practical side of things.
That is what the DA is trying to do, that they need to stay longer in the GNU. They need to, because they are the bigger partner with the ANC in the GNU arrangement. So when the two bigger partners do not work together, they may get very well punished in the next election cycles that are going to be coming. So it's in the interest of the DA in particular, of course, of the ANCs as well, but much more for the DA to be able to consolidate its voters and make sure that they actually get even more voters in regions where ANC has been dominant. So I think ANC has to guard its back and make sure that they are able to prove where they are governing or where they are running portfolios, that they can also match the DA's tactics. So it's going to be a serious contestation, as we actually even have seen in some of the tweets on social media, that some of the senior members of both political parties sometimes are exchanging very tough messages. So this is really to send messages to the voters. This is to send messages to South Africans that we are the ones that are more interested in you. Please remember us in the next cycle of elections. But I think overall, the DA, it's in its interest that they stay longer in the GNU, because that will build a lot of political currency for its for the next cycle of elections.
Professor Phago, very, very quickly, former President Thabo Mbeki was speaking earlier today, and he delivered the keynote address at the closing ceremony of the ANC's party's renewal workshop. And obviously, he is speaking to renewal. And it kind of raises the question of how the ANC is likely to react to the DA and many other political parties now being in government. How do they win back those votes? Because I'd imagine that's part of the conversation they're likely to have.
And I think ANC has been having this kind of conversation for the longest time. But Thabo Mbeki was also very critical of the ANC. And one of the critical areas that he raised alarm that ANC needed to work very hard on is to build capacity within its ranks. And because he indicated very well that they were able to identify the problems in the ANC through their own, investigations and some of the surveys that they undertook. But the biggest challenge remains that ANC itself does not seem to have capacity to correct the wrongs, especially even when it is in government. So in other words, the kind of people they deploy in government do not have what it takes to actually deliver services, because we've seen from these previous elections that it is based on a poor track record of service delivery that ANC is losing support. So it is going to take a huge feat and arrangement within ANC as a political party, especially in the centers of economic in the economic centers like Johannesburg, where Thabo Mbeki focused on that. They will need to attract some of the best minds, some of best administrators that can build a rapport for ANC to come back and say we are able to deliver services. So this is going to be interesting.
It certainly sounds like it, Professor Kedibone Phago. Appreciate your time. Always great speaking to you.